In this beginner tutorial, we're going to be learning 3 different ways of changing colour in Tunisian crochet. I'm going to be demonstrating all 3 methods on Tunisian simple stitch, but you can apply them to other types of Tunisian stitches as well. We're going to be starting with stripes. So for stripes, we change colour at the end of a return pass, and to do this we stop just before our final yarn over and pull through 2 at the end of the row. So I'm going to drop my current colour behind my crochet and then pick up my next colour, and I'm going to lay my new colour over the top of my crochet hook, leaving a tail long enough to come back and weave in later. And then I'm going to use my hook to pull that new colour through those last 2 loops of the return pass. And I've now successfully changed colour. I recommend here that we make sure that that colour we dropped is behind our crochet. If this is the last time you're going to be using this colour, then you can snip your yarn and weave your tail in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you about how to pick it up later to do 2 colour stripes like this, and we end up with a bit of carried yarn. If I show you up the back of our work, but it means we don't have to weave in ends at the end of every stripe, so it's a really handy tip to know. So now go ahead and do both your forward and return passes in the new colour, and then come back to this tutorial once you've just got 2 loops left on your crochet hook at the end of your return pass. So I've worked that row in my new colour and I've got 2 loops left on my hook, and I'm going to change back to my original colour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the colour that I've been using. I'm going to make sure I'm dropping it over here. So over along this side of my hook so it's out the way. And then I'm going to pick up that yarn that we dropped the row below. I'm going to pick it up like that. I'm going to wrap it over my hook like that. We need to make sure that this is not too tight or too loose here. We need it to have good tension, just like we do with crochet. Then I'm going to pull that loop through those last 2 loops there. I've successfully changed colour again. We can actually do this over and over again, and you don't have to do this at the end of every row. If I show you this here, this stripe in the middle is actually 2 rows here, and it just means that our carried bit of yarn at the back is a little bit longer. So now I'm going to show you how to do something similar, but rather than getting stripes, this will give you a blended colourwork effect. So I'm currently at the end of a forward pass, and to get the blended colourwork effect we basically do the same as the stripes, but we do it at the end of the forward pass before we do the return pass. So kind of we do the first half of the row in one colour and the second half of the row in the other colour. So if I just grab this swatch and just show you, so this is what the blended effect looks like on the front. But on the back it's very stripy still, so it is a really fun colour effect. So to change colour at the end of a forward pass, we're going to put our hook underneath those 2 loops at the end. I'm going to pull up a loop of my old colour, so I'm still using that colour there, and then this is the point where we drop our yarn. I'm going to pick up our next colour by yarning over and pulling through 1 loop. There. Then we're going to complete our return pass just as we would normally, so yarn over, pull through 2, all the way across. So finish that return pass and then do a forward pass in this orange colour and come back to this tutorial and I'll show you how we pick up that other colour to continue this blended effect. So I'm almost finished that forward pass, and you can see how we've got those 2 colours combined in that final row there. So to change back to the original colour, I'm going to put my hook underneath those 2 loops there, and then I'm going to drop my colour that I've just used. I'm going to drop it and make sure it's down over here. I'm going to yarn over and pull through that edge stitch like that. And then I'm ready to continue doing my return pass in the original colour. Then I would do the forward pass in the original colour and keep changing colours every row, and that would continue to get us this blended effect. Next we're going to learn how to do mid-row colour changes. So for mid-row colour changes, we start those colour changes on the forward pass, and we actually work the colour changes on both the forward and the return pass. So I've worked my forward pass to the point where I want to join the next colour, and then for the next colour, when I put my hook underneath the loop, I'm going to drop that other colour, grab my new colour, yarn over and pull through a loop. Then I'm going to continue working my forward pass in the new colour, leaving the first colour hanging at the back. So we're now going to work our return pass until we get to the point where we've changed colours. So I've worked that return pass along all the orange stitches here, and then it's really important at this point that we cross our yarns over as we pick up our colour, our first colour again, this taupe colour here. So to do that, I'm going to take my orange yarn, I'm going to cross it over the top of my crochet, and I'm going to hold it over here for now. Then I'm going to pick up my taupe coloured yarn, and as you can see, that has crossed our yarns. I hope that's obvious there, that my yarns have now crossed over each other, and that keeps our colour changes nice and neat. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish my return pass with the taupe colour. So I'm going to show you one more row of this colour change just to make sure we've got it in our head what we're doing with crossing the yarns. So I'm going to work my forward pass with the taupe colour up until the point we change colours. So I've picked up that final taupe loop, and then on the back of our crochet, if I actually show you now where we crossed our yarn, can you see how where we crossed our yarn on our return pass, it has kind of locked that colour in place? If we don't do this, we actually end up with holes running up between our colour changes. So we're going to colour change again, and I like to cross again here. So to do that on this bit, I will pull my taupe colour over to my yarn over here, making sure to go over the top of my orange, and then I'm going to pick up my orange. So I've crossed those yarns again. And then we're going to work our forward pass and return pass again in this orange colour. So I'll meet you back at this colour change point. So I'm now at the colour change point, and again I'm going to pull my orange yarn over to alongside my crochet hook, and I'm going to pick up that taupe yarn, and I'm going to finish off my return pass. So as you can see, that method gives us a lovely neat join for a mid-row colour change. And then if you wanted to get a checkerboard effect like this, we would actually be combining the mid-row colour changes running up here, and then for these colour changes it's just the same as when we colour change for a stripe, but we would snip our old colours of yarn and join two new colours. So if you're looking for some more Tunisian crochet tutorials, I'll pop up my playlist here, but I also have a whole bunch of normal crochet tutorials as well, so do check out my channel. I'll see you again next week for another tutorial.